real. Well, good morning. We've been looking forward to being with y'all today. And so we are going to start, just for new faces that don't know us and that maybe we don't know, a quick introduction of who we are and what we're doing. And then
every time I do this, I'm going to try and change a slide. So we'll see if it works for us.
And we do have lots of good stories. So we're going to talk really fast. So listen fast.
All right. So for those of you who don't know us, I'm Kevin. This is Casey. Our four girls are sitting here in the fifth row. We've got Chloe, Claire, Caitlin, and Caroline. They are 16, 14, 12, and 10. And yes, it's me and the five women in the RV. And Aaron's reminder was a good thing to count your blessings. So I have half the number of women to deal with that Jonathan Edwards did. So we are surviving. If I've made it this long, we can keep going. So it has been a good journey. You can see the picture there of our fifth wheel and our truck. That was just prior to our departure when we hit the road with our newly formed ministry. And so we have a ministry where we travel all over the country encouraging church planners. And so we're going to go a little bit more into that as we get started.
So in August of 2021, we did create our nonprofit ministry called Through the Eyes of Our Tribe, which most of you have seen. And so our sole purpose is to travel around North America and to encourage church planners and missionaries. So one of the most interesting things for me and Kevin over the last about 18 months has been the stuff we have learned. So I, like most of you, Kevin changed denominations when he was, but I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. We went to a Southern Baptist seminary. Kevin he spent almost 20 years on staff at Southern Baptist churches. And one of the most interesting things is all of the things that we have learned. We had no idea all the things that the North American Mission Board was doing all across America and all the work that was going on. Do you want me to keep going? Oh, yeah. There we go.
Every time I do this, if it doesn't go, Sydney's going to click it for me.
So. Okay. That's a good cue, right?
Yep.
So we wanted to take a second and talk about the North American Mission Board because we've learned a lot, and so that's one of the things that we feel like one of the ways that we hope the Lord can use us in this season is by sharing what we're learning about the North American Mission Board. So if you know, the Southern Baptist Convention has two arms, the International Mission Board and the North American Mission Board. Those are kind of self-explanatory as far as what kind of areas of the world. So the North American Mission Board has got 32, well, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, though.
You are.
I'll wait. Keep going. Do you want to pick them?
Yeah, so obviously International Mission Board, that's one of the things we highlight this time of year as Southern Baptist churches. The Lottie Moon Christmas offering is a offering that highlights and goes directly toward the International Mission Board. We work alongside, not directly with, but alongside the North American Mission Board, which encompasses the United States and Canada. For whatever reason, it doesn't include Mexico. Mexico's considered international, and Canada's not. But anyway, so we work alongside the missionaries who are working directly with the North American Mission Board. And the North American Mission Board is actually headquartered up in Alpharetta, and that is where their headquarters is. They, although now, I think COVID did this to a lot of places, they're more decentralized now, and they have leadership kind of scattered all over the United States.
So the North American Mission Board is kind of divided into a couple of different sections. So they have what they call Send Network, which you see. Send Network is their arm and their branch of all of their church planning all across North America. Then they also have the Send Relief, which is their arm of disaster relief, foster care, kind of their more humanity-driven, is that the right word?
Yeah, food poverty. They do various ministries to help needs that are in the communities where their ministry centers are located.
So, but the Send Network is what kind of the people that we target and that we connect with, people that are planning churches all across North America.
So when you think of North America, we've got a map that's going to come up here shortly, and you can see all the dots that are there. And what those dots represent are the send cities. And the North American Mission Board has identified 32 send cities where it's their estimation that 80% of the lost population of North America resides in one of those 32 areas. You can tell that they're very metropolitan areas, large population centers, and about 80% of the population of North America lives around those 32 places. And so I think that's how they came up with that statistic. But they target those areas because of the lostness, because there are so many people that are unreached with the gospel in those areas. And so they use those as kind of their target areas. Those are not the only places where they plant churches. They're not the only places where they do ministry, but those are their main focus areas throughout the United States and Canada.
So of those 32 send cities, 27 of them are in the lower 48. And we actually, in the last 16 months, visited all 27 of those send cities all across the United States. We are hopeful to get the last 5 maybe in 2023, but the last 5 are in Canada. And so we would love to be able to go to Canada this year, but we're going to have to see how our schedule begins to work out.
So as we have met with church planners, as we've met with missionaries that are a part of the North American Mission Board, it's been interesting to find out that we're not sure. We have come across no one to this point that has been in all 27 of the U.S. send cities. We met one missionary just outside of St. Louis, and he had been to 25 of the 27, and he thought he was the one who kind of held the record as being in the most of them.
He was North American Mission Board staff.
Yes.
So NAM staff. And so that's one of the interesting things that I think has caught, the NAM staff has kind of caught attention, or we've caught attention with the NAM staff because we visited all 27 of the cities. So a lot of people ask, what do we do in these cities? And so we thought we'd just kind of walk you through the process of how we approach the cities, who we contact, what we do, and what it looks like when we get there.
So when we are getting ready, when we're preparing to go into a new city, a week or two out, typically about 2 weeks out, I will look at this website. This is the North American Mission Board's website. It's hard to see detail, but it just gives you an idea. There's an interactive map that is on their website, and you're able to filter things on the map. So if there are green dots on the map, it's established churches. If there are yellow dots on the map, it's places where they have a desire and they see a need for a new church plant. But then the white dots are existing church plants. Those churches that have been started within the last 5 years is what they consider an active church plant. And so I do this. I filter the green and the yellow dots out, and I look just at the white dots. And my first interaction with the city is to look at this map and just pray over this map. And my prayer is simple. God, help some of these white dots to turn into relationships where I can be an encouragement to a church planner who needs encouragement. And then I begin the process of sending out emails. I email as many of them as I have information on. This site also, as you click on one of the white dots, it populates and it tells you whatever information they've entered in, I can access. So if they have an email address, if they have a cell phone number in the system, I have access to that. And so I send all the emails, and then I wait a couple days, typically get a fairly slow response from the emails. I think people see the emails and they're like, okay, that's just another email. But then I follow it up with a text message, and they're like, oh yes, I did get that email. You are a real person. You are wanting to interact with me. And then they typically will set up some sort of meeting, whatever that looks like. And the things that I throw out, hey, we could grab breakfast together, grab lunch, we could do coffee, whatever that looks like. We'd love to get together with your family if that's a possibility. So in some of the cities, we're able to connect with the families. Some of the cities, it's me and a church planner having a meal or coffee together at that point.
So, anytime we can just connect to hear their stories, hear their struggles, hear their successes, just to encourage them with one of the things we like to say is the power of presence. How many of you have been in a situation where the power of someone's presence spoke louder than anything else that they did? I think we've all been there. And so one of the things that we have found and continue to find is sometimes it's just the power of presence. Sometimes it's just the fact that we increase their church attendance by 6 people. There was one church outside of Chicago, and we get there, and it was a community center where they met. There was nobody in the parking lot. And so the girls immediately were told Kevin, said, Daddy, you go see what's good. We couldn't figure out if we were in the wrong place or what was going on. So Kevin goes up to the door, knocks on the door. We're all watching from the truck. Nothing happens. So he stands there a minute and he starts looking in windows, and he finally comes back to the truck. And so we were debating, I'm on Facebook and on different trying to figure out, are they not meeting? So in a few minutes, the community center door opens and somebody sticks their head out. And so Kevin walks back up and motions for us to come on. Well, so that particular Sunday, this little couple outside of Chicago, it was them and their 4 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, their 4 kids, us and the girls, so the 6 of us, and 2 other people and their dog. And so for that Sunday, it ended up that we were able to take them out to lunch. The girls they had little kids, and the girls grabbed their little kids with some ice cream from the place and took them out on the porch, and we got to just talk to them for a little while and hear how discouraged they were and the different roadblocks and hurdles they had with their core team. The fact that they couldn't find anybody to do music, they just had they were just in a time of just struggle, and so we just got to spend time with them. But that Sunday, the fact that we increased their church attendance by 6 people for them to worship together was just the power of presence. And there was one other story. You want to go into this one?
Well, on that same family, what's been interesting is we go into a church, we interact with the missionary, their families, whoever that may be that we get the chance to have time with, and then it doesn't stop there. So this particular guy, Jonathan, he and I would text back and forth occasionally, and I keep up on their social media and see what they're doing, and I knew that they had a soccer Bible camp coming up this past summer. And so just
a few weeks after we were there,
shot him a text. Hey, I see that your soccer Bible camp's coming up. Just wanted you to know I'm praying that you have a successful camp and that it goes well, that you see fruit from that. And then I see reports on Facebook, things went great. So I'm able to contact him. Hey, tell me about what went on with your camp. And he was super excited, super encouraged about what God had done through that. And he shared with me that 2 of the families from that camp had then later attended their worship service and had begun connecting with their church family. And so we hit them at a very low time, and then as we were able to track along with them, we've seen how they've been able to gain a little bit of momentum, and we've been able to encourage them in that. So in situations where we're able to connect with the family, then I follow up and keep in communication with the husband. Casey keeps in touch with the wives, and it just gives us an opportunity to really encourage them, not just in a one-time interaction, but I have contacts now all over the country in all 27 of the U.S. Send cities and other cities that we've been able to stop in between. And I have ongoing text conversations with a large percentage of those people that I still communicate with on ongoing basis.
Yes, so the next thing that you're going to see is a picture of a family. This is the Grants, Patrick and Jennifer Grant. So they live outside of Portland, Oregon. So when we stayed outside of Portland. We stayed at the base of Mount Hood. It was actually beautiful. We didn't do a lot in Portland because everywhere you go up there, they say, you're not going into Portland, are you? But this was a little suburb, and this couple met in a community center as well. And this was the church that we had decided to go to. Kevin had reached out to him and hadn't heard back, but we decided this is where we were going to go. So we get there that morning, and we have the dually truck. We don't slide into anywhere, And so we roll up in the dually truck, and the 6 of us. And the way that this building was designed, you had to turn in. The community center kind of sets sideways to the road, so you had to turn in and go right across in front of the front door, and then park in the back. And so we pull in the dually truck, and we see the little group of people, at the door. Look, and so we get pulled around and parked, and we get out and start to walk back towards the door, and this gentleman comes right to the front, and sticks his hand out and immediately starts asking questions. Well, we come to find out it was Patrick. And he begins to ask questions. And finally he looked at Kevin and he said, am I supposed to know that you're here, that do I know you? And so Kevin said, well, no. And so we start talking. Well, come to find out, he had seen our Georgia tag when we came in. Well,
And panicked. He panicked thinking, oh, there's people here that I'm supposed to know they're going to be here. You know, it's not every day that a Georgia tag pulls up in your
in Oregon. So
parking lot.
Turns out he grew up in Macon. His wife grew up in Valdosta. And they're now in Portland, Oregon, planting a church. And so, yes, there was a little bit of panic, but what we also represented to them was a piece of home. And so when our Georgia tag pulled in and they began to talk about, you know, he grew up his parents still attend Ingleside in Macon, Ingleside Baptist Church. She talked about where her family goes to church in Valdosta. And so this was a picture from our lunch. We ended up getting to take them to lunch on, I think it was Wednesday, after we had attended church. And so we got to go to this really neat little place and hang out with them and hear their story. And so it was just a really sweet time of connection, just that power of presence. So another question that we get sometimes is, what have been some of the highlights?
And that, to me, is possibly one of the most difficult questions out there, because in one way or another, almost every interaction that we have is a highlight of sorts. Just the fact that someone would respond and say yes to a meeting with a complete stranger from somewhere they don't have a clue anything about me other than what they see on the website. That's all they know about me. That's all they know about our family. And time again, people put themselves out there to have a meeting with me or with our family. And to me, that's a sign of God's going before us, because I don't know how many emails you get, but if you got a random email from someone you didn't know, maybe a follow-up text message, you may or may not take the time to communicate with that individual. And so it's always a highlight to me when people respond back. And I know that God's gone before us to set up all of those meetings that we end up having.
So three different things that we kind of narrow this question to. And the first thing, and some of you will remember that our timeline of getting off continued to get pushed back because our RV didn't come. There were several hurdles that we had before we left Tifton. And so one of the things that we always point back to is that God's timeline. You know, it's not about our timeline in life. It's God's timeline, and God puts us in just the right places at just the right time. And so we don't want to look over that, you know, that God's timing is perfect. And so his timing to put us in places where we could minister and where we were there at the right time has been just humbling, mind-blowing, all at the same time. So that's the first thing we always point to as a highlight.
And there's been multiple times that we've shown up and there's been a ministry need that we could kind of step into and fill, that had we left on time in our minds, we would have been a month, 6 weeks early for the appointment that God had for us in his timeline. And so oftentimes it's easy to get frustrated when you have an idea of how things should go and how you've planned them out. But just know that God is in control. He is the one whose timeline really matters, and be flexible. Yes, we have to make plans. Scripture encourages us to make plans, but when we begin to see that he's taking them a different direction, we have to be flexible and willing to go along with his timeline, because his timeline is obviously perfect.
We've seen time and time again just where we look at each other and we say, that was a divine appointment. You know, I'm going to tell this quick story because we really need to talk fast. There is a couple we were traveling through, so we did some sightseeing this summer with Kevin's family and then with my dad and his wife. And so we're leaving kind of in between one of those, and we were traveling through, and we were going to be in this city in Idaho called Idaho Falls. It's west of Salt Lake City, over into Idaho, and Kevin had somehow known that there was a guy that had planted a church there, and so we were going to overnight.
That fancy map that I'm like, oh, we're going to stay at Cabela's in Idaho Falls. I wonder if there's a church planter, and I blow up the map for Idaho Falls, and there's one lone dot in Idaho Falls, and I'm like, let's see if we can get a hold of this guy. For that particular dot, I click on the dot, and there's an email address is the only thing I have to go on. I send an email, it immediately comes back to me, the email address is bad. And so I reach out to a friend, I'm like, do you know anybody in the convention in this area that might be able to get me some contact information? Yes, so-and-so is the regional person for that area. Here's his cell phone number. I shoot him a text, hey, this is who I am. I'm looking for some information on this Jimmy Horsley. Do you happen to have information on him? Immediately I get a call back. We have a conversation. He gives me Jimmy's contact information, and I'm able to reach out to him.
So it was actually the morning. This was a Tuesday night. We were going to be staying in the Cabela's parking lot in Idaho Falls. On Tuesday morning, before we traveled, Kevin sends him a text. Just a quick, hey, this is who we are. You know, what do you and your family happen to be available tonight for dinner? We'd love to take you out for dinner. The guy says yes. And so we stop at this Chili's in Idaho Falls. They walk in, and I'm quite certain that at that point, everybody in Chili's, so we immediately start to figure out they're also from Georgia, have been there a few years.
It didn't take us long to figure out because she had a pretty strong accent.
Yes.
Stronger than any of ours, and we have a Georgia accent as well.
So we were all at this big long table. They have two sons, one that's the same age as Chloe, I think, and then one that's Caroline's age. And so we're at this long table, and I'm sure these people in Idaho thought that Georgia had taken over with all of our. So we ended up moving from Chili's to an ice cream place there. From the ice cream place, they took us to see their church, which meets in kind of an industrial park. Turns out, he said, no, you're not going to Cabela's. We got hookups on the side of the church building. So we back in beside their church building in this industrial park and plug into electric and water. We ended up being with them until 11:30 that night. And through a series of events, we find out they're lonely. They're in an area of the country that's heavily saturated with Mormons and Latter-day Saints. Their kids just didn't have a whole lot of connection because they're new. She had lost her mom to COVID the year before, which many of you know that I lost my mom years ago to cancer, and so that was a connection that we made. And it was just evident that God had put us there at that time for that divine appointment to stay connected. And we still to this day stay connected to them. We even circled back through a few weeks later and went to church with them. So it's just that timing and that connection.
And one thing that stuck out to me as we circled back and were able to go to church with them, and then the next day we were leaving town, but they saw that we hadn't left town yet. They're like, what are y'all doing for dinner? Can we join you? And so they ended up meeting us at Freddy's, and we had dinner together before we left town. And as we're standing in the parking lot getting ready to part ways, the mom said, it's just so hard to say goodbye. And the teenage boy, 16 years old, says, yeah, it's hard when there's people who actually want to talk to you. And that's a big statement from anyone, but especially for a teenage boy to express that. You can tell that the influence of the Latter-day Saints culture in that area, as they get older, they begin to separate more, and the LDS church begins to separate themselves more and more from the culture. And we'll get to that a little bit more as we continue on. But that was just heartbreaking to me to think that, it was just refreshing to this teenage boy to have some people around that were asking questions about them. That were like him and just willing to interact and be social. And so that was a neat time that we were able to have, and a special relationship that we built with that family.
All right, we're about to fly through this next slide.
Okay.
So the second thing that we talk about as a highlight is just the opportunities we've had to do family ministry together. There's some pictures in this one of a church we got to work on in the lower Ninth Ward of New Orleans, which is one of the poorest neighborhoods in New Orleans. We got to pressure wash the church, to paint it. We were with another family that's good friends of ours from Arkansas, and we all got to work together to help get this building ready for a church to start meeting in it, and that was just a neat opportunity. The other pictures you see are from a carnival, like a fall festival in New York City that we helped with. last fall, so 2021 in the fall, and we got to help with their registration table and some of the different things. They had a couple mission teams, and we got to jump in and help with that. And so just the opportunities we've gotten to, as a family, minister together have definitely been highlights. Yes, okay, we're going to keep moving.
All right, so what have we learned about the cities that we've visited? I think it's interesting to look at, obviously, all the places that were on that map, the Sin cities, are a little bit different culturally from each other, much different culturally from South Georgia. And so as we've gone into these cities, it's been a learning process for us. And as we've been able to kind of be all over the country, we've been in 43 of the 50 states in the last 16 months. And we've been able to get a little bit of a taste of all these different areas. And there's some things that we've learned that we probably knew a little bit of in the back of our heads, but we had never really learned much about it. And so that's been a great process for us to learn some about the culture of these different areas and different cities and how it impacts ministry in those different areas.
But before, we're going to talk a little bit about different parts of the country, but before we move to that, I want to say this, and this is the thing that has been on mine and Kevin's hearts as we were coming back home for the holidays. If there's one thing that you take away from today, this is what I want you to hear. I want you to know that God is at work all across America. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Satan, through social media and news networks and the news outlets, he wants us to think that things are horrible everywhere. And now, granted, there are some things that are concerning in our country and in our culture, but God is at work all across America. Mm-hmm. And I don't want us to lose sight of that, because God is working despite, you know, the human race, and as he has been for years, and so God is at work all across America, and we've seen it with our own eyes.
So one thing that you've probably heard, maybe you've even said it at one time or another, is the nations are coming to America. And I think we've all heard that for sure, that the nations are coming to America. We see that a little bit here in this community, but when you get into some of the larger cities, you begin to see the extent to which that is a reality in our country. The nations really are coming here in mass numbers. So I think I shared the last time we were here, but Boston, there are 1.25 million Brazilians in the greater Boston area. In the greater D.C. area, around Washington, D.C., there's 750,000 Ethiopians. As we traveled out west, we began to see similar numbers in various people groups on the West Coast. I was able to meet a gentleman in Denver that is planting an Ethiopian church, and the small suburb of Denver where he's planting, there are close to 70,000 Ethiopians in that small community. And so he was actually an Ethiopian Orthodox priest.
We had to Google what that was.
Yes. came from Ethiopia to the United States, ended up interacting with an Ethiopian church planter in the Denver area, ends up giving his life to Christ and being saved and coming out of the Eastern Orthodox Church and really kind of exposing some of the falsehood within that church, and has grown a huge following on social media. And so he is now planting a church in that community outside of Denver, but his greater ministry almost is to Ethiopia, because so many people are following him and learning about the true gospel through his social media platforms and YouTube channel, where he's just exposing some of the lies that are out there and exposing people to the truth of the gospel.
In these pictures, you're going to see several different areas of the country. So you see us in Times Square, and then that is what's the name of that lighthouse in Maine? Oh, Sidney Cromer might know. Anyway.
Portland Headlight.
There we go. Thank you. Anyway, in New England, we've done 2 stints through New England, and in New England it's so interesting because in New England you experience a lot of the hustle and bustle of city life. It's city, 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 so it's a lot of hustle and bustle, a lot of transition. One of the church planners said it to us this way. He said, he's actually from Georgia too, and he said, in the South, everybody has 2 walls. He said, in the South, the first wall is kind of short, and then it takes a while to get over their second wall. He said it's quite the opposite in New England. He said it takes a long time to get over that first wall, but once you get over the first wall, their inner wall is much shorter because they've allowed you to, because they have started to trust you.
And those 2 walls, it's the second wall. Once you get over that wall, then it's like your family. And he said it takes forever in the Northeast to get past that first wall, that beyond just the acquaintance, hi, how you doing? Whereas here, you can go deeper than that pretty quickly. But to really get more intimate and become like family takes a little bit longer. And so it's interesting how in 2 areas of the country, those 2 walls are kind of flip-flopped.
Yes, in the other corner you'll see it's a sign, but what it says is Shanku Washday Ranch. So in South Dakota, and the picture beside that is their kids. It was their day camp, a picture of their day camp, large group gathering. And so this ranch is located in South Dakota. It's interesting because the couple that founded and has started this ranch, they've been there about 10 years, and they're also from Georgia.
You're seeing a theme here, right?
Yes. So they have started this ranch. It's right on the inside of one of the Native American reservations there. We're just outside Badlands National Park. They, about 10 years ago, went there, started that. Their main ministry is that they bus kids from like a 35-mile perimeter or a 35 miles radius, that's the right word, into the ranch for the day during the summer for day camps. So they usually have mission teams come in 1 a week for about 7, 8, maybe even 10 weeks in the summer, and they do day camp for these kids throughout the summer. But one of the things that they're also trying to do is to reach the families of these kids and the other people on the reservation, and so they've built this wellness center. And this wellness center is going to have dental care and some eye care. They have a dentist from Rapid City that's helping them. They've had donated all kinds of equipment. All that to say, they have begun to permeate and to be trusted there on the Native American reservation. What I didn't know about Native American culture is just the darkness that is associated with Native American culture. The suicide rate is incredibly high. Addiction, drug addiction, some different like almost witchcraft type things that they participate in. It's just a dark, heavy place. And
with that, there's a history of the church with Native Americans, and it's not a good history. And so for a missionary in that area, it takes a long time to establish a trust. And through them being there over the long haul, they've been able to establish that trust with the people on the reservation. They've been able to, actually about 7 years in, through some horrific events that we don't have time to go into, but they ended up adopting this gentleman into the tribe and accepting him as one of their own and honored him in a big ceremony. And just really neat story of how God used tragedy but used it to establish the ministry that they have now is due in great part to the tragedy and to the difficulty that they had to go through.
This guy, the church that they planted that's associated with the ranch, he told us he's been there about 10 years, and he's done like 230 something funerals in the amount of time that he's been there. So that gives you just an idea of just kind of the darkness that's in that culture in that area of the United States.
And a lot of times he ended up doing funerals for people that he didn't know. And there was one reason that he got called, and he was one of the only people in the area that had a backhoe. And so he was able to dig the grave and do the service, and kind of a two-stop shop, and or one-stop shop for all the services that they needed. And so, but in that, he was able to minister to a lot of families, but that really took a toll on him, just all that interaction over a pretty short period of time.
One other area of the country that we've mentioned briefly is just with the Mormon and Latter-day Saints. The middle of the country, Salt Lake City. There's a picture of the girls at East High in Salt Lake City, if anybody knows what East High is. And so that area of...
You better tell them, because not many of them do.
So East High is where the Disney movie High School Musical is all filmed and staged, and so we had to sneak by there and grab a picture. We may or may not have gone behind construction gates to get that picture. That's right.
No one was arrested in the taking of that picture.
Yes.
So.
But that area of the country, it's interesting. So there was a couple that we spent some time with in Salt Lake City. They have two girls. One is like 12. One is like third grade, maybe. She was a little bit younger than Caroline. And it was interesting to talk to them. They were originally from Oklahoma and had gone to and had planted a church. Their church met. We went to church with them. Their church met in a dance studio. And you can actually be praying for them today because they're doing day 2 of an event. They have a mission team there this week, and they're doing a night in Bethlehem, kind of an interactive Christmas experience. And so one of the things that they talked about was just the oppressiveness of the Mormon and the Latter-day Saint culture there in that area of the world. There's all kinds of different things that we learned. I don't know, people there they're told where to go to church. So if you're a Mormon, if you live in a certain spot, you're told that you're going to go to this ward and to this church. At 12 years old, they start to heavily indoctrinate the children, and so they have to come in and meet with the priest, I don't know what he's called. And they have to meet alone with them, and at that point is when they begin to receive some of their temple rights, and they're encouraged to only associate with people like them. So one of the big things that this mama was nervous about, their names are Dustin and Sarah, and they planted the church there, and she was super nervous about the upcoming school year especially, because the oldest daughter is 12, and so a lot of her friends were going to begin to disassociate at her friends at school. There was going to be some disassociation there because they know that she's different and she's not, Latter-day Saints or Mormon. So pray for Dustin and Sarah today as they do their second their second day of their night in Bethlehem.
All right, so what have we learned about church planters and missionaries? We've interacted with and had meetings with over 150 missionaries and church planters at this point as we have gone around various parts of the country, and we've learned a lot about them. One of the things that we've learned is they are extremely determined and persistent. Those that have gone out, the North American Mission Board does a very good job of assessment, and they make sure that the people who go out have a very clear understanding of what God has called them to do. And they go through that extensive process to establish and make sure that each missionary knows specifically what God's calling them to, because they know it's going to be hard. And as it gets hard, many of them, that calling is all they have to go back to. When things get tough, like the couple we mentioned in Chicago, they weren't giving up. They were discouraged, but they weren't giving up because they knew that that's where God had called them. As they had been there, they had seen the need for what they were doing in that community was even greater than they had imagined, and they were sticking to what God had called them to. And one word that I like to use to describe church planters is stick-to-itiveness. That's one I picked up from a pastor friend, and it really describes church planters well.
We have like 3 minutes, and so I want to leave you with a couple of, for the wives that I connect with or that I get to meet along the way, I continue to interact with them usually about once a month. And, us girls are better at providing detail. Kevin and the guys' text messages look a lot different than mine and the wives. And so I just wanted to leave you with a couple of different, I'm going to share, I went and pulled together some different things just so that you can see why God continues to emphasize this calling for us in this season of our lives. This was from a wife outside of Portland, Oregon also, and it was interesting because when we got together with them that night, she was very standoffish. She stayed that way throughout about 3/4 or maybe more than that of the evening, just not really sure what to think of us or how to engage or interact. We ended up doing dinner, seeing their church building, and then taking them to this place called Crumble Cookies, which many of you have probably not experienced. But if you ever get to a city that has a Crumble Cookies, you need to experience it.
You need to, right?
They're
She uses that word loosely.
They're really good. So by the time we got to Crumble Cookies, she had finally started to kind of like some of her shell had started to crack. And so I interacted with her about a week later, and here's what she said. She said, "Thanks so much for your prayers. I really enjoyed meeting you and your family. You remind me of home, and I really needed that." This is from a wife outside of Cincinnati. "Things have been very busy, but also really good. God has answered our praying to bring along more spiritually mature people, and now we have a team for kids ministry, which feels like a big answer to prayer. We also have a group of girls who love to plan events. We had a fall festival 2 weeks ago, and it was our first event without the help of a missions team. It felt like a big win." This is from the Sarah that I was talking about in Salt Lake City. "Last night we set up a whole thing at the house of one of our church people and made cotton candy and popcorn for trick-or-treaters in the neighborhood. They live right by where we meet for church and where the girls go to school, so it went so well. We felt encouraged after that." This is from a wife in Pittsburgh. She says, "Church is going well. We've had a few new people jump in, which has been nice, and a couple from our baseball team have been coming and have both professed faith, which is so cool." So they have 3 boys, and the boys play baseball in the community, and so it was a family that had started to come to church.
And you may remember that family from our last update when we came, and we talked about the first place we went, and the girls were able to babysit the boys. The wife had just had a miscarriage the week before we got there, and God just really linked our 2 families up. When we went back through the Northeast, we met up with them again, and the week before, the wife had had her second miscarriage. I had a Zoom call with the pastor Monday of this week. He and I began talking. I asked him how church was, and he let me know that it was a little bit heavy because they had just experienced that weekend their 3rd miscarriage. And so pray for that family, just that God would encourage them. They have a strong desire. They've got 3 boys. They have a desire to have more children. She's a pediatric nurse, and she sees all the children that come in, and many of them are parts of much larger families whose parents don't take care of their children very well. And she's like, "We just want to provide a home. We want to bring another child into our family, and we want to provide this." But they keep having these miscarriages after the 3 children that they've had. So pray for the Page family.
This is just a bunch of pictures of families, just so that you see all the different people that we, some faces to some of the stories. But I want to end with a scripture that we've kind of claimed and that we go back to on a regular basis over and over again. And it's from Isaiah 45, and it says this: "I will go before you and will level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron. I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord, the God of Israel, who summoned you by name." So that's where we'll leave it today. We're thankful for the call of God on our lives in this season, and we're thankful that he summons each of us by name as he sends us out into whatever our daily callings are.
And we're also incredibly grateful for you. We are grateful for Mount Zion partnering with us, helping send us and be a part of all these interactions that we've been able to have. As we go, we don't do it alone. We do it through the support of churches like yours, from the prayers that you all pray. We appreciate your pastor and his wife and the encouragement that they are to us on a regular basis. And so thank you for what you do. And one of the things that I talked to Aaron about this week, one of the things that I'd like to do is provide a list of church plants. And he shared with me in prayer meeting that y'all pray for different churches on a regular basis. And so what we're going to try to do is incorporate some church planters into that rotation. And so I'm going to be providing Aaron with a list of church planters that you all can be praying for, and then follow up with some notes of encouragement to those folks as well, and just be an extension of what we're trying to accomplish. We want to have your church be an extension of that ministry as well. And so thank you for having us this morning, and we look forward to continuing to partner with y'all and being your hands and feet as we go out and looking to encourage more church planners along the way. We were close, a few minutes over, but we apologize.